This is CNN.
Candidates make a lot of claims on television. It isn't easy to separate fact from fiction. If you have trouble knowing who to believe, what the facts really are, and how much is being left out, stay with CNN. As part of a continuing series called Democracy in America, we'll identify negative ads, misleading ads, exaggerations, and explain the strategy behind the spots. It's all part of a different kind of election coverage you'll find only on CNN.
Live from Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, courting controversy? In the Crossfire, in Atlanta, attorney Jay Sekulow, co-counsel in Lee versus Weissman. And in Boston, Harvard Law professor Laurence.
Good evening. Welcome to Crossfire. Conservatives who thought they had an airtight majority on the Supreme Court got a couple of surprises today. The court held first that a prayer by a rabbi at a junior high school graduation does violate the Constitution's ban on the establishment of religion. The smart money was betting that the court would reverse or at least cut back 30 years of rulings against school prayer and other public religious exercises. The smart money was wrong, but the vote was just 5-4. In a second case, the court held that tobacco companies can be sued for misleading customers about the dangers of smoking. The companies had argued that federal warning labels make such lawsuits invalid. The court said, sorry, let the litigation commence. The vote was 7-2. Is the Supreme Court not the conservative monolith people thought? And what does that portend for future decisions, like the one expected any day now about abortion? John?
Professor Tribe, this decision occurred last week, which was in the hate crimes case, which in combination with the decision today seems to make this a nation in which we have more right to be vile than we do have a right to pray. That's not a good decision. Good set of decisions.
I think that's a complete misstatement, John. We have a right to pray, and the court said that that right is so important that the government has got to keep its hands off completely, that prayer is fine, but it's an official prayer which students might feel pressured to take part in at a graduation in high school is no good. So the court is being quite consistent.
But folks will still look at the pair of decisions and feel that the court has said that those acts which were included in the hate crimes seem to be more protected than the act of prayer.
No, I think, John, if they listen only to you, they might look at it that way. But the fact is that the Supreme Court said that you cannot selectively punish hate crimes because you disagree with the point of view.
All right,
freedom of speech is protected. Freedom of religion is protected as well. But one of the things that Justice Kennedy went out of his way to say today is that speech and religion are protected under our Constitution in somewhat different ways. We use speech often to convince government to take our point of view. But government is supposed to be completely neutral on the matter of religion. It's not supposed to take sides, and religion is a private matter. That's really what the court stressed today in its religion decision.
All right, then if a valedictorian goes to that same podium and starts his speech with a prayer, that's okay?
Absolutely. If it's not an official prayer, here the school system selected the rabbi. They had guidelines for what was in and what was out. It was very much like an officially composed prayer, and government has no business composing
but there are
what
some
people
silly
say to
distinctions.
God.
There are some silly distinctions in this decision. For example, it said you can't pray at ceremonies, graduations for primary and secondary school, but it's okay at a public university. Now you can't tell me.
I don't know why it's silly. I've often thought, and most of us think, that as people grow older, they get more mature and less subject to peer pressure.
You don't really
between you've got to draw the line somewhere. Obviously, a high school senior is something like a college freshman, but you have to draw the line somewhere.
You don't really believe that's the kind of distinction that those who wrote the Constitution had in mind, that you can do it you can't do it in high school, you have a prayer at a high school graduation, but you can have it at a college?
They certainly had in mind the principle that coercion is different from freedom, and we have to, each generation, draw the particular lines in terms of what that principle means today.
Jay Sekulow, you were on the losing side in this case that the court decided today on religion, but before we get into the crossfire, I want to ask you a non-crossfire type question. How do you explain the result in this case? It's a surprise. People thought Reagan and Bush have appointed a majority of the court. 8 of the 9 justices are reported by Republicans. Everyone expected you to win, basically. Just without going to the rights and wrongs, why do you think you lost?
I think the court is still confused, Michael, over the issue of religious expression in the public arena. In the opinion today, we have 9 justices and 4 different opinions, some concurring, some dissenting. And the court is still confused and struggling with the issue of what is the role of prayer in the public arena? What is the role of prayer in the marketplace of ideas and the religious speaker in the marketplace of ideas? The court's still struggling with it. It took 30 years to get us in the mess we're in, and it's going to take some time to get us out of it. There is a chink in the armor in this case because the Lemon test, which was the traditional test that was used to...
Named after a court decision of a couple decades ago.
That's correct.
The Lemon versus Kurtzman.
Right, was used to get rid of school prayer, was used to remove the 10 Commandments from the classrooms. That test was not applied today. That was the first time in about 20 years. So there's a chink in the armor here.
I think you've got it all wrong. I mean, for one thing, you argued, as did the Bush administration, that the Lemon test should be thrown out. And today, the majority of the court went out of its way to say that you were pushing too far. They weren't going to revisit the test.
Professor Tribe, with due respect, let's take a look at what the opinion said. Your friends at the Supreme Court, the liberal wing of the court...
My friends, I don't know any liberals left on this court.
Well, there's a couple, and they're the ones who said the opinion didn't go far enough because it didn't apply Lemon. Justice Blackmun said that.
But the court itself, sir, actually did say we are not going to re-argue or reconsider the Lemon test. They said that explicitly.
That's right. And why is that? And if you read Justice Scalia's dissent, and I believe Justice Scalia's dissent is going to become the majority down the road, but Justice Scalia's dissent points out to the fact that basically Lemon was ignored, and we say that it's about time for that. But let's go one step further. Something, Professor Tribe, that you said, I'm glad to hear it. I hope all of America and around the world hear it. You're going to now agree with us that if it was a valedictorian who was giving that prayer at a public school graduation ceremony, it would be no constitutional violation. If we've accomplished... Well, that's good news.
That's clear. That's always been the case. I mean, prayer cannot be gotten eliminated in the schools. People are going to pray as long as there are math exams.
Well,
but what's wrong is official prayer. That's what's wrong.
Well, that's great because we've had over a dozen cases this past month involving student-initiated prayer. And as Justice Scalia said in his dissent today, the idea that graduation prayers will no longer exist is wrong. They will. They will be back next June. Now we have to put disclaimers saying prayer is still, the word pray is a 4-letter word in our public schools.
I really
now
think
we have to have a disclaimer.
Well, you know, demagoguery. It's the way people argued for a long time. President Reagan argued that the court has taken prayer out of the schools. That's always been nonsense. It has taken official and potentially coercive prayer out of the schools. Individuals are free to pray.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I've been fighting for that for 5 years, and now we're getting agreement.
You may need a refresher course in constitutional law.
I don't think so, Professor Tribe. I've had a dozen of those cases this year.
For a second. Isn't it a little patronizing, Mr. Sekulow, for you to say that the Supreme Court is confused, they don't know how to get their way out of it, you understand it, but they don't? These are 9 very smart people. They've argued about this issue clearly, and they have clearly come down as a majority saying, despite the fact that they were appointed by Reagan, appointed by Bush, appointed by Nixon, they disagree with you.
Michael, hold it. Michael, let's talk about what you just said. The court is clear. That's why there were 4 opinions in 9 justices and 4 opinions. The court wasn't exactly clear.
That's a bum rap.
It's not a bum rap, Professor Tribe. It's reality.
One at a time, Professor
It's reality. You asked, I get to answer the question since you asked, Michael. It's reality. The court is struggling with a difficult issue. That's why you have 4 opinions in a case that should have been one way or the other, but we still come out with 4 opinions.
Isn't saying they're confused just your way of saying I lost?
No, there's no doubt about it. We did not get what we wanted in this case. We lost. We're not done fighting. We'll be back. But the point is, the court is still struggling with the issue,
what I'm trying to
or you
figure out
wouldn't
is,
have 4 decisions.
Jay, let me ask Professor Tribe a question. Professor Tribe, you talked about official prayer. Now, the act of
I'm sorry,
saying
I didn't hear you, John. What kind of prayer?
You made the distinction of official prayer as being the test. Saying the Pledge of Allegiance in the classroom is an official act. It is in the same context as leading prayer. It says under God. You're going to ask for that to be stricken?
Not at all. The court has made clear, even Justice Brennan, who was a true liberal when he was on the court, made clear that a passing reference to God, in God we trust on the coins, the court's own ceremonies begin by asking God to give his blessing. That's not what this is about. This was an official, explicit religious ritual. That's really quite different.
What makes this explicitly religious, Professor Tribe, and the court's crier, the marshal of the court, saying, God save the United States in this honorable court? What's the difference between a rabbi and the court's own court officer? None.
I wrote a book called God Save This Honorable Court, and I didn't think
We've
that
got
I
to-
was...
We've got to
that
cut
wasn't
away,
like-
and we'll be back in a second. We'll be back, and when we return, we'll ask our guests whether today's second decision on the right of individuals to sue the tobacco companies won't add to the problem of just too many lawsuits.
Dear Folgers, I run a bed and breakfast. When I overslept one morning, the Folgers switch saved my reputation. The percolator wasn't even set up, so I secretly switched Folgers crystals for the brewed coffee I normally serve. Well, the taste and aroma must have fooled them, because they were shocked when I revealed the switch and joked about sounding like one of your restaurant commercials.
Folgers Crystals, proven to surprise fresh brewed coffee drinkers.
Sincerely, Janet Turley.
An interesting thing is happening to driving enthusiasts. They're multiplying, and that's a blessed event for the Saab 9000 Turbo, which not only does 0 to 60 faster than a BMW 535i, but has one of the roomiest interiors of any imported sedan. The Saab 9000 Turbo, the sports sedan you grow into, not out of.
Maybe it won't save the planet or make the whole world a better place.
Don't suppose you're going to help me paint, would you?
Sure, Grandpa.
But today, Will Bartlett made a choice that'll help keep a small part of the western sky the way it was meant to be. New Glidden Spread 2000. The first interior wall paint with no solvents that could harm the air.
Let's get some paint on that roller.
Glidden, a better way to paint.
Next in Consumer News, California.
When you need the latest business and financial news, turn to CNN Headline News at 15 and 45 minutes after every hour. Dollars and cents on CNN Headline News.
Welcome back to Crossfire. Tonight we're discussing the two controversial Supreme Court decisions handed down today and the direction of the Supreme Court in general. Our guests are Jay Sekulow, who was the co-counsel in the Prayer case, and Laurence Tribe, a professor of constitutional law at Harvard University and one of the lawyers who sued the tobacco companies in that case. Professor Tribe, let's talk about the tobacco case for just a moment here. There's an argument being made that what the court did was send this all back down into the state courts, and as a result, the state courts are going to get flooded with these cases. Is that one of the results?
Let me clear up a couple of things. First of all, I didn't sue the companies. I was asked and I agreed to argue the case in the United States Supreme Court. And the principle involved was really very simple. The principle was that using the federal warning label does not completely immunize these companies by giving them a license to lie and a license to deliberately hide information that's relevant to the public on addiction, on side stream smoke, on the special hazards of smoking. Now, the particular case came from a federal court, not a state court, and yes, it will lead to more lawsuits. That was the point in part. But it's not just a matter of suing. State and local regulators now are liberated in a way that they might not have felt free before to impose burdens on cigarette companies of a kind that are imposed on other companies, not to deceive the public. And I think that's exactly what Congress intended, and I was pleased that the court agreed with that position by a vote of 7-2.
But Congress never intended to absolve the individual of some personal responsibility in making that decision to smoke.
That's right, and that's right. And the companies can be expected to argue in particular cases that the plaintiff assumed the risk, should have known, and that's going to be an issue for the jury. It's not at all as though somehow this decision means that all plaintiffs are going to win. I think we should not underestimate the resources of the tobacco lobby and of the cigarette industry. They'll do pretty well.
Some are arguing that very same decision actually made it harder for those defendants to win. Is that going to happen?
Harder for the defendants to win? In the sense that...
Allowing them to sue, but making it a more difficult hurdle for them to overcome.
For the plaintiffs to overcome.
For the plaintiff to overcome. I'm sorry, you're correct.
No, that's crazy. I mean, the point is that the law until today looked like the plaintiffs confronted an absolute sort of an iron door. They couldn't get into the door at all because they were confronted with the argument that as long as you have that federal label on the package and in the ads, you're home free. Now the the door is open, and we can get to the merits. The playing field has really been leveled.
Jay Sekulow, you know, it's my observation that when corporations and conservative business interests lose their interest in states' rights and federalism, which they claim to be in for, whenever they see an opportunity that will help them. This is really a case about federalism, isn't it? It's said that just because the federal government passes a law requiring labels, that doesn't mean that state governments lose all their rights to protect the consumer. That isn't necessarily an unconservative result, is it?
No, it's not. I don't think that this is an unconservative. I don't think the victory that Professor Tribe here is against a conservative view in the sense that we've always argued, I've always argued in the Supreme Court and elsewhere, that the consumer and the individual always has the right to know. I agreed with Professor Tribe in this case, and I think what he was arguing for in that case was if something is effective, if I get affected by something, I have the right to know that there is going to be exposure, that there's going to be damage. And you had a situation where the cigarette industry was trying to shield itself. I don't think, though, on the other hand, that this is going to make the job of the plaintiff easy by any stretch of the imagination. They still got a difficult road to go, as in the trial court especially, the assumption of the risk, that cigarette smoking and the risk there. So it's not a windfall for the plaintiffs, nor a disaster for the defendants.
Do you disagree with Vice President Dan Quayle, who would be saying that lawsuits are no way to settle this sort of thing?
Well,
Isn't there an inherent conflict between the alleged conservative concern for the rights of the individual and the alleged conservative concern about too many lawsuits?
No, and you use the word alleged there, I noticed on both. And is there too many lawsuits? Well, you know, you're talking to two lawyers, so I don't know if we'd ever say there's too many lawsuits.
Oh, I would, frankly.
Well, hold it. Professor Tribe, the question was asked to me. You'll get your chance in a minute. I'm sure you disagree with me on this point. Are there too many lawsuits? When you're going after individual rights and individual benefits under the Bill of Rights, there's never too many lawsuits when a right's involved. Now, in this situation, you're dealing with a damage suit, but there are rights involved, so I don't necessarily think there's too many suits here, no.
Professor Tribe, what's your feeling on that?
Well, in fact, I very much do agree that when it comes to vindicating rights, lawsuits are fine. But I was going to make the broader point that a few years ago I wrote this little piece called Too Much Law, Too Little Justice. I do think that sometimes we resort to the law in family and other matters where the law is not helpful. But here, the idea of having some kind of little mediation discussion between the giant tobacco industry and poor Rose Chipolone wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Professor Tribe, the court's decision today kind of undercuts your argument that the court is too conservative. This is a decision right on the way you wanted it. I guess it reinforces the fact that this court can do what both sides might interpret as being right.
Well, I've never thought that this court can do no right. But it is a court that's moved very far to the right.
Some of your statements were almost that, Professor Tribe.
Let me ask.
I agree with both of them.
Let me ask Professor Tribe a question about the direction of the court. You know, these opinions that have come down the last few days seem a lot more contentious and biting and nasty than the opinions were back in the times when the court had real ideological divisions in it. The hate crimes case, all 9 justices were in agreement, and yet you had Justice White taking potshots at Justice Scalia. In this religion case that came down today, Justice Scalia says about Justice Kennedy, he calls him incoherent, accuses him of using a bulldozer. What is going on this court that it seems to be an ideological accord and yet is calling each other names?
Well, Justice Scalia in particular has been rather sharp-tongued and is getting more and more so. I think what's happening is, in some ways, when the stakes are reduced, the voices are increased. I mean, people are yelling at one another when they are really much closer together. It's a bit silly.
It's like Crossfire.
Is Jay Sekulow, let me ask Jay Sekulow, is this a case of what they call the narcissism of small differences?
Well, I think some of it is just small differences in approach and not basically underlying theory they agree on. But what you've got here, Michael, is as the positions become clear, the parties become and the justices become more polarized. I think you're going to see that in the next day or two on the abortion case in Casey.
All right, stop right there, because that's what we want to get into after a break. What is going to happen on the big abortion case, the case of the year, which is due any day now?
Hello, I'm Susan Rook. At the top of the hour, Ross Perot jumps in the political name-calling fray, accusing the Bush camp of dirty tricks. Also, did the government lie about the fate of American servicemen missing in Southeast Asia? And what might come next in the rail strike? Prime News, right after Crossfire.
I just picked up the mail and I noticed my tax refund. Compared to what I'm paying in taxes today, it's nothing.
I remember when this used to mean something.
I've got to find a way to keep more of what I earn.
Common sense says you should keep as much of what you earn as you can.
Well, at least this will pay for my phone bill.
And you can earn income that's tax-free with Fidelity Investments, America's largest mutual fund company.
I was on my way to my new accountant.
These are all taxable investments.
Yeah, and his tax bracket.
I knew I'd pay taxes on my salary, but my investment income?
You're not going to like the news.
So, what do we got?
The good news is that we have some great ideas for next year.
Next year?
With Fidelity's tax-free funds, you can earn income 100% free from federal taxes, and in many states, free from state taxes as well. Plus, there's no sales charge. Call now for this free booklet, A Common Sense Guide to Tax-Free Investing. Call 1-800-328-8500. Fidelity Investments. Common sense. Uncommon results.
Next time you wonder if this country has what it takes to compete in tough, demanding world markets, stop by one of our hometowns. No matter where you live or close by. Over 2 million people in 48 states helping make the Boeing Company America's largest exporter.
From John Grisham, best-selling author of The Firm and The Pelican Brief, two great thrillers about lawyers on the run, comes the story of a lawyer on the spot in the searing courtroom drama, A Time to Kill. Now in Island Books paperback.
On CNN tomorrow, what will happen to the Mafia now that John Gotti is in jail? On World Day, then on Cryer and Company, can Ross Perot win the woman vote? All tomorrow on CNN.
I want to ask both of you, but let's start with Jay Sekulow. Do the two surprises today make you think that we are also going to be surprised about the forthcoming abortion case, which people also were expecting the new conservative majority, almost unanimity on the court, to be expressing itself?
I don't think there's going to be unanimity on the abortion issue, Michael, but I do think that there are the votes to undercut, it's already been undercut, the abortion right is recognized in Roe versus Wade. Whether the court's going to take this opportunity in the Casey versus Planned Parenthood case to do that, we're going to find that out Friday or Monday. But I think that there's no doubt there are 5 votes to undo Roe versus Wade. Whether the Casey case is the one that will do it or not, we'll find out soon. But there's 5 votes to undo Roe versus Wade, no
Larry
doubt.
Tribe, if you were a betting man, would you bet differently today on the Casey case than you would have bet yesterday?
No. In fact, I wasn't particularly shocked by the Prayer decision today. I was pleasantly surprised by my own victory. I think that the Casey decision, first of all, we have to realize the court might, as a political matter, just duck and decide to put it over till next term and combine it with the Guam case. So
that it
there might be
affect
quite a
the
surprise.
election.
It might be might end with a whimper rather than a bang. But if they do decide, I think they will probably decide the case in a way that will avoid massive headlines. They're not going to be likely, I think, to say Roe v. Wade is hereby overruled, but they are almost certain to permit states to impose new obstacles and burdens in the path of women who seek abortions and put the matter even further into the political process, which is where many people, I guess you included, Michael, believe it belongs.
I'm afraid so.
Jay Sekulow, this prayer decision, let's go back to that. You talked about the confusion in the court. Is the only way to solve that a constitutional amendment?
Well, I think voluntary school prayer, I think it's an education process. There is the right for students to have voluntary school prayer today. And I think we need to educate school administrators, principals, and school boards so they don't prohibit the rights that Professor Tribe now agrees with us on. And I think it's important that that myth that there is no voluntary school prayer be put to bed. Now, whether a school prayer amendment will go through, it'd have to be worded carefully, and that's a very long political process. This issue of voluntary student-initiated school prayer is not over with yet. As Justice Scalia noted in his dissent, it's going to come up
Tribe,
again.
are you going to let Mr. Sekulow's position be sustained with just a court decision, or is he going to have to go get a constitutional amendment?
He doesn't need an amendment. I mean, he suggests I now agree that that voluntary prayer is fine. I've taken that position for about 20 years. It seems to me that public education is fine. I'm all for it. We don't need to amend the Constitution to reaffirm the status quo. Voluntary prayer is fine. It would be an outrage for school officials to prohibit students from praying. I think that would be outrageous.
Thanks a lot, Professor Tribe. Thank you, Mr. Sekulow.
Glad to be with you.
John and I will be back after this brief prayer.
I was already late for my meeting when my flight landed. Lucky for me, someone left a courtesy car. I had to get to Dollar Rent-A-Car fast. I knew they were right on the airport with low rates.
Welcome to Dollar.
Hello, I have a car rental reservation.
No problem. I'll just punch it up on the computer. Dollar Rent-A-Car is right on the airport, right on the money, with unlimited mileage and locations worldwide. Call your travel consultant or Dollar at 1-800-800-4000.
Recently, the International Motorsports Association held a decathlon of performance and control. Over 22 days, 7 cars competed in 10 events to determine which was best overall. It wasn't Acura or Volvo, nor Mercedes or Mazda, nor Lexus or BMW. But the Audi 100 V6, the IMSA Decathlon gold medal winner.
I was really downing those tablets. Come on, they're not candy. I started to think there was something really wrong with my stomach. Was I relieved when my doctor told me to try a new antacid tablet.
Introducing Mylanta tablets, shown to neutralize more stomach acid than the leading tablet.
Unbelievable.
New Mylanta tablets.
My doctor said Mylanta.
Tonight on Sports Tonight, the good, the better, and the best of tonight's NBA draft. The most torrid team in baseball, the Braves, keep cooking, and another one bites the dust at Wimbledon. Details and more, 11 o'clock Eastern tonight.
Michael, even though there are some that say this court could never have come down with that decision if I had stayed at the White House, let me say that what the court did today, even though it's a wrong decision, I think demonstrates that it's a thoughtful, hard-working court and is capable of looking at cases not in a stereotyped way.
Well, I will admit to being very surprised and pleasantly surprised by this decision. And if it shows that there isn't ideological unanimity necessarily, but it's not for lack of trying on the part of the people who've made these appointments in recent years.
Michael, now that they've gotten their wrong decision out of the way, we hope they make the right decisions from here on in.
Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of a chance to argue about that one. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
And from the right, still counting on the court, moving to the right, I'm John Sununu. Join us again tomorrow night for another edition of Crossfire.
Prime News is next, and Justice Bernard Shaw will deliver the opinion of the court. Your Honor?
Oh, yay, oh, yay. Thank you, Michael. Coming up, the feuding heats up between President Bush and undeclared candidate Ross Perot. A Supreme Court ruling exposes cigarette makers to potential lawsuits, and more questions about a controversial scientist who claims to have co-discovered the AIDS virus. That and more just ahead on Prime News.
Coming up, Prime News, followed by Larry King Live after a word from your local cable system here on CNN.
You know, when you treat folks right, do good work and stand behind it, word gets around. I appreciate it, ma'am. That's why I always tell my customers to buy Quick Trip gasoline. You see, Quick Trip is known for treating folks right. They stand behind everything they sell. And that includes an unconditional guarantee on every gallon of gasoline you buy. Unconditional guarantee. With Quick Trip around, why take a chance anywhere else?
What makes Iowa Realty's Home Show 92 such a crowd pleaser? The Home Builders. 12 of Des Moines' finest craftsmen showcasing their work in a dozen luxurious homes.